Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, where we help cops navigate their challenging careers during challenging times. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. My name is Garrett Tesla. I'm an active duty lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I am on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. Now, make sure that you subscribe to the show so you don't miss a single episode, and go back and check our catalog of amazing guests who are there to help you live that career and live that life that's worth living. All right, we have a great episode for you today, but before we get to our guest, I want to remind you, I have a weekly newsletter called the Tactical Tuesdays with some tips, some strategies, some tactics, some things that I like, some things I think you should know, maybe a training video, and it's absolutely free. And you can go to thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays to sign up. And you can also, of course, check the links in the show notes for this episode. Subscribe there. All right, my guest today. I'm super excited about this one. I worked hard to get him on the show, and it took months of coordination with his office, and his people were amazing, but I got him. It's Dr. John Delony. John is a New York Times bestselling author. He's a mental health and wellness expert, and he's the host of the incredibly popular, often iTunes Top 100 podcast, The Dr. John Delony Show. John holds 2 PhDs, one in counselor education and another in supervision of higher education. And he spent 2 decades working at universities as a senior leader, researcher, and a professor. John now currently works with financial guru Dave Ramsey, who you've probably heard of, at his Ramsey Solutions company in Franklin, Tennessee. But he also spent a lot of time working in crisis and emergency response and in critical incident stress debriefings and such for police departments and fire departments. What isn't as well known about John is that his dad was a cop, a homicide investigator, actually. And so John knows firsthand what it's like to grow up in a household with law enforcement. And I don't think it's any surprise that anxiety is something that he's become an expert in, because our jobs often create not only anxiety in ourselves, but in our own families. And so John goes into that in this episode, talking about how the effects of our job can impact the people that we love most in this world. And it's really, really powerful conversation. And John knows, like I said, directly what that is like. John has written extensively about anxiety and how to navigate it in our ever increasingly anxious lives. And his new book, Building a Non-Anxious Life, is fantastic. I love it. I recommend it for everyone who's watching or listening to this right now. In his book, he breaks down 6 choices that you have to make in order to break free from anxiety. And in this episode, we go through his 6 choices that you have to make and how they relate to us as cops. And he really brings it in this interview with great strategies and some real specific things that we can do. And I got a lot out of the conversation. Yeah, as someone who has a constant low hum of anxiety going on in my brain pretty much all the time, I found this book to be a huge resource for me. It got me real clear on a couple things that I had been struggling with, and I tell him about that in the interview. And even if you feel like you're not an anxious person, the book is full of actionable advice on how to create a mindset for success, however you define that for you. If you're familiar with John, you know that he's funny, he's sharp-witted, he's very quick on his feet, and of course, he's a fan of punk rock. And so we even talk about that and how that's made him a better counselor and how that made me a better cop. And we share our love of Social Distortion and Bad Religion and other bands like that as well. It's a great interview with someone I'm so proud to have on the show. So please welcome Dr. John Delony. This episode is sponsored by Tactiscan. There have been a lot of advances in law enforcement technology in the last couple of years, but I think Tactiscan is the biggest leap forward since body-worn cameras and tasers. Tactiscan is a portable drug screening device designed to detect illicit narcotics on site with no officer exposure. It's the perfect solution to ensuring that your officers stay safe and avoid unnecessary exposure to harmful substances, while also giving you an enhanced investigative tool in the field that's far better than those clumsy presumptive chemical tests that we've been using for decades. The Tactiscan is a reusable pocket-sized narcotics screening device that connects by Bluetooth. It uses near-infrared spectroscopy. That's a big word that simply means that Tactiscan uses infrared light to interact with the sample and then measure the reflected light that is carrying the information. This doesn't damage the sample at all, and the technology can recognize a narcotic even if it's mixed with a cutting agent. TactiScan is about the size of a mobile hotspot device, and it can support numerous users without additional fees. It's also about 1/5 the cost of its competitors, which actually makes it feasible as a tool for your patrol officers. They've been hugely successful in Europe for years, and now they're just launching in the United States, so it's great to see this technology become more available to keep our officers safe. To learn more about TactiScan, visit their website at tactiscan.com. That's TACTISCAN.com. Dr. John Delony, welcome to the Squad Room.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. I've been a huge fan of your work for a long time. Was excited to hear about the new book coming out. Love your show. Love your messages on social media. So it's a total treat to have you on. And I've done your intro, before we jumped on this call, so everyone knows who doesn't know about you at this point. with
Yeah,
two
plenty of
bestsellers.
people, trust me.
But the thing that really fascinates me about you, and I hope to bring to color the perspective as we talk about your new book, Building a Non-Anxious Life, is that you grew up as the son of a cop.
Yeah.
And so it's really unique to have someone with such a cultural competency in their history. So really excited about that. And I'm going to jump in and make it weird from the start. And I promise I'll let you talk here in a second. But I wanted to share it with something with you that I think will help guide the conversation. And so, we're here. It's a Wednesday. We're at the beginning of the year. And I don't do resolutions, but I have a history and a practice of naming my year, so that I kind of give myself a theme to return to throughout the year. Last year was the year of permission, and giving myself permission to try new things, do new things, let go of things. The year before that was the year of the fight, when I was just recently diagnosed with a chronic rare disease. And so there's a theme to those years. And this year, as I got into 2024, I named it the year of the reclamation, because I wanted to reclaim a lot of my parts of my life that I had parsed out, either to the job or to the trauma from the job or to other people. And I really liked that concept, but I was struggling with what I needed to reclaim necessarily. Mind, body, spirit didn't seem to make sense, all these things. And so as we prepped for the interview, and I read your book, it dawned on me that the 6 daily choices you prescribe in the book are exactly the things that I was looking to reclaim. So on a personal note, thank you for writing the book, because it really did impact me directly in shining a light onto what I was trying to achieve. So thank you for that. Let's start with that.
Dude, my brother, thank you so much. That means the world to me, man. That means the world. Thank you.
And so, yeah, the new book, which is already a bestseller, Building a Non-Anxious Life, you do a lot of your work in anxiety. That's something I also have a deep well of experience in, not from the practitioner and therapist, but from the experiential side. I've talked this on the show before about panic attack that sent me to the hospital, convinced I was having a heart attack. All the anxiety of being a cop. And so the book is a great navigation point for people to build that non-anxious life. You frame the idea of creating a non-anxious life around choices that we make, or that we can make on a daily basis. And so I just found a lot of correlation to things I've experienced, things that I think cops have experienced in general, and would like to just kind of go through them and not give away the book, of course, but just kind of touch on
We can give it away. We can give it away. It's good.
and frame some of those ideas for someone. And the one that I think struggling with recently the most is the first one, is choosing reality. And in the book, you have a great quote that says, "We're always solving for reality." And I'd love for you to dive into that before I provide some thoughts on it.
Yeah. Man, thanks for all those kind words about that book. I'm going to screenshot that. I'm going to snap and make my daughter listen to that because she thinks her dad's a dork. And I'll also say this: my dad, I grew up in the home of a policeman. That was kind of the culture, as you know. And also, I don't talk about this publicly. I kind of hint at it, but part of my crisis victim services team, I was part of a patrol team and ran Victor One and had my own. There was a group of us, and we rotated in and out all the time, and we're always serving police officers and the families when things. The goal was to get the officers back out on the street, and so we would take care of the the 1016, all the domestics and the mental health breaks and the crisis response so they can get back out on the work and do their job. And so that's been my whole world. Those are my friends. That's my gang. So I appreciate you allowing me to speak to with my people for for a change. It's awesome. Um, I think an important frame. So you're right. So there's these 6 choices. I think an even a 20,000-foot view behind that one is this one, what I would consider a terrifying but true proposition. What if our anxiety is right? And most of us spend all of our time trying to solve it. I don't want to feel like this. If you don't tell anybody you feel like this, bro, you need to go have a drink. You need to get that fixed. You need to go talk to somebody. What if your anxiety is right? And I think that question frames the book because I happen to believe that most of our bodies are working pretty dang well. And it becomes, instead of running from it or hiding from it or numbing it out or trying to shut it off, it becomes, all right, what's that person who's trying to help me? What are they trying to tell me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of choosing reality is this. Um, we have a culture of distraction. That's where we live, right? There's always another thing to do. There's always another busy thing to do. There's always another achievement to go get. There's always the next thing, right? So as soon as you get a Corolla, you got to start saving up for the Camry so that you can save up for the Tundra, right? The soon as you you get through academy, you immediately have people going, all right, you got to do 3 years. You got to take that detective test. You got to, are you going to do patrol forever? How long you do patrol? You're going to move over to Vice. And so there's, our whole culture is built on what's next.
Mm.
And so we end up, as my friend, I think I quote him in the book, Ian Simpkins says, if busyness is your drug, rest will always feel like stress. We are going, 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 going. And our bodies are always solving for reality. What do I mean by that? Your nervous system knows that your marriage is falling apart. It doesn't matter how much y'all sleep together. It doesn't matter how often y'all are sitting on the couch watching the same show while you're on your phone and she's on her iPad. Your body knows this thing's broken. Your body knows that you're not healthy. Your body knows you're not sleeping. And so you can lie to yourself. You can prop yourself up with chemicals. You can go to sleep with chemicals. You can do a lot of different things in this modern world. But your body's always solving for reality. It knows how much money you owe. It knows you don't know how much money's in the checking account. It knows you don't trust your wife or your husband because he may be cheating on you. It knows, it knows, it knows, it knows, it knows. And so one of the cornerstones of what I would call emotional health, or down the road a little bit, mental health, is congruence, aligning what I know to be true factually with what is actually true. What is the state of your marriage? What is the state of your physical health? Are you going to get fired from your job? How much money do you actually freaking owe? And when you start answering those questions, your body actually stops sounding the alarms. Because once you're in the driver's seat of your own life, um, you know this, like you train and train and train and train and train and train, and then a thing's on you, a situation is on you. You don't get anxious. You may get nervous. You may get scared. Which if someone had a gun and you'd be, it would be wrong for you not to be scared or nervous.
Sure.
But you're not anxious, right? You're trained for that moment. Your body knows you're in the driver's seat. It's when you're not in the driver's seat of your own life that your body sounds the alarms. And that's deciding I'm going to choose reality and begin to take ownership of what is actually true in my life.
Mm.
And that's where healing begins.
You touched on something real interesting too that I think I've discovered over the last couple of years is that some of the things that we try to dismiss or to hide or to cover up, sometimes we maladapt to the stress and the traumas and all that sort of stuff. But yet it's not a maladaptation necessarily. It is what our body is best capable to do in that moment. It's the
Yeah.
only way our body knows. And we can give ourselves a little grace if we take a breath and think, okay, you know, I had 3 extra slices of pizza I probably didn't need to eat, but nonetheless, that was me trying to manage as best I know how. And the awareness of that is where we can kind of transition into a new version of ourselves, right? Is that hit
Yeah,
for you?
I'll never get mad at a policeman who drinks. Ever. You know why? Alcohol works.
Mm.
It works great. Going to a work every day and not one person calls you because they're having a good day. And every day you show up to domestic after complaint, after, are you freaking kidding me? After body, after body, after body, after, hey, there's a skunk in the road. Like, what? I don't even know what to do with that. What are you talking about? You calling me? Somebody called 911 because there's a skunk. I don't know what to do with it. And then, by the way, everyone's filming you and everything is 24/7, 365. You're a global news story every second of your life. Are you kidding me? A Jack and Coke will make all of that stop for a minute. But I
Mhm.
want you to know, yeah, that works in the short term, and then it'll kill you. It'll take your marriage. It'll take your job. Your kids won't want to be around you, and you lose everything. And so, it's recognizing, oh, this is what my body is doing to not deal with reality.
Mhm.
Let's deal with that. And the goal here is not to pull more people off the street, to put more people in therapy. The goal is not to go around and pat ourselves on the back and say, "Oh, poor us, look how tough our job is." No, 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 that's not the goal at all. The goal is to make sure everybody's anchored into bedrock so they are able to, like, jump into these situations that our community so desperately need them to be involved
Mm.
in, right?
Mhm.
The goal isn't to run, the goal is to be fully there so you can jump all in.
And that's the progress of personal development. You had John Chris, the comedian, on your show recently, and he said something that was a total light bulb moment. And probably maybe just the way he said it. And I'm paraphrasing for everyone, but he said that the unhealthiest he's ever been was when he placed his self worth in the hands of other people,
Yeah.
which I thought was a brilliant insight. And it goes to that reality of where do we give away our sovereignty.
Mhm.
And for cops, I think we do so much of that. We put it in the hands of the public and their perception of us, or we put it in the hands of a district attorney and what they do with a good case that we then gets dropped because of some legal minutia that's not our fault, or we put it in the hands of other bosses, and we end up in that vicious cycle of giving away our sovereignty to people, and then we're miserable
Right.
as a result. And I think that's part of that reality idea.
And instead of asking the question, did I do my best work on this case? Did I show up? And when I say show up, I don't mean show up hungover, sprinting out the door, coffee on my tie. That's not what I mean. Did I get some sleep? Are me and my spouse aligned? Do I have as good a relationship as I can have with my kind of chaotic teenagers? And I got my workout in the morning, and I showed up to work. I gave my best effort on this case. I spell checked my report, for God's sake. Gosh, the number of reports I've read have been like, dude, you don't want this read in court, man. Like, actually spell checked my report. I got someone else to read it, make sure it's good. I did my best work, and I put my name on it, and then I passed it over. That is where I'm going to draw my integrity from. It's going to draw character from. That's where I'm going to draw my applause from, if you will, that I put my best foot forward. Not over, yeah. And by the way, dude, I grew up with a dad who was like the DA, the DA, the DA, and then I spent 6 years as a dean of students at a law school, right? So I spent my whole career trying to avoid attorneys, and then I went to their hatching ground, right? To, like, we're all like Jurassic Park for attorneys, and I learned they're doing their job. They're working hard. Their job is to find loopholes. So I can spend my whole life angry and raged out by that, or A, I can do my best to close every a loophole I possibly can, and B, I'm going to not put my self-worth into an outcome. And I think most of us are insane about outcomes instead of putting all the work on the front end and saying, I'm gonna do the best work I can. Is it a
Mm,
beating? Oh my gosh, yes. Is it awful to get misaligned? Yes, absolutely. Um, but is it reality? No.
yeah. Yeah, and then that's a great segue into the next choice you suggest each day, which is to choose connection. We just had, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Jeremy Nobel. He was the last one of my last guests, and he's an underachiever like you with two PhDs, a Harvard Medical School professor and public health professor. He runs Project Unlonely, a great book that just came out on that whole topic of just loneliness and connection.
Mm,
And then in your book, you talked about how you and Ramsey Solutions had surveyed your audience, and it was telling to me because it was similar to a survey I did recently of my audience, where in your survey you found 82% of people say that they spend most of their time with people they don't know deeply.
mm,
And my audience in a recent survey, 90% of them said they want more connection with other cops, but in a deeper sense, right? What's going on in our modern lives? I know this is a huge question. I'm going to ask you to do it short, but
yeah.
why is it different now, or has it always been this way? This lack of connection, and we're just realizing it, or is there something going on culturally now that we are just distancing ourselves from each other?
I I'll just speak to police officers here because that's a real big question. I've wondered if it's chicken or egg, if people who are just kind of lone rangers end up drifting towards this job. Um, Here's what I knew from the inside out. You are disincentivized as a police officer. You're disincentivized of being fully known. Because if you say the wrong thing, they're going to pull you off the street. They're going to put you behind a desk. They're going to put you in some sort of program. If you tell somebody you're struggling with X, if you tell somebody Y or Z, if you tell somebody, hey, I really blew up my marriage and I need a minute, they're going to tell you, oh, wah, 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 get something to eat and get back out there, right? So
Mhm.
there's no, it's disincentivized, to be honest. The
Mm.
best program I've ever seen in my life is with the guy named Dr. Andrew Young, who is a brilliant mental health practitioner who works exclusive with police officers. He's incredible, out of Lubbock, Texas. But he actually worked adjacent to the police department. He'd be a great guy for your show, by the way. But here's what he did: the police knew I can call him and he's safe. He doesn't have to put it into some report. It doesn't go into my file. And I can tell that guy. And the city trusted him so much that for a season, I don't know if it's still that way, but for a season, he would just report. I saw 14 of them and they'd write him a check. And so it was a good way to um, incentivize people. That guy's okay. He's safe. He's one of us. You can go talk to that guy and it's not going to come back and bite you.
Mhm.
So I think for police officers specifically, there's a disincentivization to get close to people. And just the lifestyle, whether you're working 412s or you're working 10s, it's hard to talk to people when you live your life outside the bell curve. You may have heard me tell the story. I used to tell my dad, my dad worked homicide, and I'll never forget one time I left my back door open. He was taking me to Little League practice, and I was like 10. He took me to practice in this little suburban neighborhood north of Houston, out in the woods. Like maybe there was some graffiti once, and kids said bad words. I mean, that was the crime. And I left the back door open, standing wide open. Which, by the way, the worst crime of what I did was I let mosquitoes into the house. And we pulled back up after baseball practice after an hour or two. Back door was open. My dad looked at me and I just remember he goes, I knew it. He pulls his gun out, which he had been carrying the whole practice, and cleared my house. He cleared it room to room. Wait here. And dude, it was light outside. I remember being 10 going, whoa, right? This is a lot. Well, as I got older, I realized that 100% of my dad's day was spent dealing with things that never happened. And when you do that, it shifts your bell curve to say, this is the way the world always is. And it makes it very hard to relate with regular people when they're like, oh my gosh, have you seen the price of gas? And you're like, have you seen all the people who are dead in this town? Right? It's hard, right?
Mhm.
And so for police officers, it's baked into the system that it's isolating and more isolating and more isolating. And then you throw on top of that, people don't know their neighbors anymore. People can't go next door and just say, "Hey, we turn the music down." Someone's going to get shot, or that's what the media tells you. And so everybody just curls up and calls the police to do basic human interaction. We outsourced all of our relationships online. People don't go to church anymore. I mean, we could do this all day.
Right, right, right.
The reality is we've just created the most isolated, loneliest generation in human history. And our bodies, like we said earlier, our bodies are keeping score. Our bodies know. Our bodies are dealing with reality. And if you go out in an active shooter event by yourself, everyone will tell you that's stupid. That's dangerous. You're gonna get yourself hurt unless you are responding in real time. Similarly, your body knows if you go do life by yourself, it's not safe. And it's going to sound every anxiety alarm you have to let you know your tribe has left you. You're all by yourself. You got to find people. And we shut that off with a drink. We shut that off with Netflix, and we go on about our day. And then we implode.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm laughing. I was laughing because I've done the exact same thing of clearing my house with my kids standing there at the front, and the door was left open. And
Well,
so,
hopefully he'll have a hit show someday, and he'll tell the whole world about it.
and then the other side of that tribalism thing is too. Like I've said before, like you don't go to many backyard barbecues where you show up and invariably you get introduced as my buddy the cop,
Of
and
course,
then
that's right.
you get the judgment or you feel the judgment or you assume that there's a judgment going on, and you stop going to the barbecues, and then you
Absolutely.
start hanging out at home, and then it's in a dark room by yourself, and then it's the
Yep.
drinking alone. All that, it's all those. It is a spiral that we can really get ourselves wrapped around the
Well, and
axle.
here's the funny thing. So let's just call that out real quick. I'm not a policeman. I would never even purport to be, but my job is a mental health guy who's got a show that's all over the place. I found myself stopping going to barbecues too, because I'd show up and they'd be like, "This is my buddy. He's got the mental health guy. He's got a show," and then inevitably there's a line of people.
Mm,
Not to sign auto, not like that. It's, "Hey, man, me and my wife are this," or "My granddad just died," or "My little boy got abused one time," and I finally just quit going. And here's
mm,
the deal. I realized I was slowly suffocating myself, both at the party and at home. So it became incumbent on me, how can I go to these parties and enjoy myself and have a good time? And I had to develop this thing called boundaries. I had to stop people and say, "Hey, I don't I leave that stuff for the show, man. I just want to be here and hang out." And so and not apologize. And it really did, it kind of put an end to it. And so I heard people when, when all the policing stuff was going up, I remember being on a panel with somebody at a university and the policeman got up and he said, everyone was introducing himself and it was a hostile crowd. And there was a whole panel of different, marshal and a state trooper and detective and local police officers. And the first guy got up and said, "Hey, my name is so-and-so and I hate bad cops." And you talk about that pin dropped in that room. And what he did was he drew a boundary. You're not going to talk bad about us because we're not that.
mm.
We're on your team when it comes to wanting to root out people who are corrupt. And by the way, we all showed up here and we're going to be honorable with each other. And it was a boundary and it was beautiful because it changed the whole room with that one sentence. And so there's a sense that here's the deal. You got to go to the barbecues. You got to be a neighbor. You got to be with friends and you got to be careful because if you allow yourself just to get drowned underwater, "Who's my friend a cop?" And if it's like, "Oh man, you ever shot anybody? You ever pull me over? Can I get your number in case I get a ticket?" You can either laugh that stuff off or you can be like, I don't do work stuff here. We're just hanging out.
Mm. It's no secret that in the past few years, criminals and anti police groups have gotten a lot more bold about challenging law enforcement officers. It's really scary because many of these groups have no problem showing up at an officer's house to try and protest or intimidate the officers. Even worse, it's easy for criminals to find your home address. And I actually have several friends and partners who have had violent felons show up at their front door after tracking them down on the internet. A lot of cops don't think about these things until they've been involved in a critical incident. New laws in many states require agencies to release the names of officers involved in shootings and uses of force. And it's not uncommon these days, unfortunately, for cops to find the media at their front door the next morning. Don't wait until you're dealing with the aftermath of a critical incident to protect you and your family. Get it done today, immediately, and I highly recommend officerprivacy.com. They will help you wipe your name and information from the web's top 70 people search sites. Check out the special deal at officerprivacy.com/the squad room, where you'll get 2 free months of monitoring and data removal, plus a free cell phone privacy device when you sign up. One of the other boundaries I see that we have to struggle with, and this is one of your next ones under the 4 areas of choosing freedom, is to create these boundaries, but with our own agencies. And the younger generation is so much better at this than my generation, and we're still kind of hangers on to the old school
The younger
mentality.
generation's kind of gone too far, but but they're doing a
Well,
good job. They're
what
doing a
I
good
mean
job.
in the sense, like, they
Yeah.
could be, but they're much better at not getting sucked into the dogma that I have to give my life 120% to the agency at all times. I must be at their beck and call. I must take the overtime. I must stay late at all times. Sure, there's times where emergencies or exigent circumstances require a little extra, but I find that they're so much more balanced in their work-life balance and really understanding what they want out of the job versus what they want out of life. And
Right.
so my
And
generation is struggling
that
with that.
I think that's a great question. I think many young professionals that I work with, and I'm just kidding, they're pretty amazing on the whole. Um, but I think they looked at their parents and they see their dad, who is a policeman, who put his 42 years in, and he always introduces himself. "My name is so and so. I did 42 years." Every policeman I know introduces themselves as how many years they've been doing their job, and they introduce themselves and say, uh, and then that he's mad at the government. He's mad at his neighborhood. His marriage is just, well, that's just your dad. And I think those kids are saying, I don't want that life.
Yeah.
I don't want to wake up and be 65 and me be that guy. and I still have a heart for public service, and so I'm gonna draw some boundaries. And, sometimes those boundaries are frustrating. Sometimes public service is a boundary-free job. If it's all hands on deck, yeah, but it's all hands on deck. If it's Christmas and your partner's got a mom with cancer, you're gonna work overtime, man, because that's what humanity is, right? But it's
Sure.
not this wholesale I signed my life away in blood oath. My kid's gonna have a dad, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it's managing that idea of like, I'm gonna reverse engineer 72 years old. What do I want to feel like, look like? What do I want my kids to think of me? What do I want my relationship with my spouse to be? I'm gonna reverse engineer that. And how can we create a world where that's possible?
And I think it really shows in again in the book in the other areas of freedom that you identify, specifically for first responders, are what you have 4 areas: money, clutter, time, and boundaries. And I really find that the money and time, when we give ourselves over to those, and we give our time in order to get money, and we're trading time for money, we end up in a situation where we aren't able to create boundaries, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
And it can be really tough, but often, I actually had some of my close friends who are in various stages of places of law enforcement and military. I had that particular chapter with them in mind.
Mm,
Um, I remember being a very young kid. I think I wrote about it in the book. I remember thinking, if this is what the public thinks of public servants, looking at my dad who struggled to put groceries on the table sometimes for just 3 kids in a very modest house that my mom and dad him shared one car. And this is back in the day. Things have gotten very way more expensive.
mhm.
I don't want anything to do with this, right? So there's a fiscal reality. If you sign up for this, it makes less money. And my goodness, I've been around some of my close buddies who get the most expensive jacked up trucks, and they've got more guns than a local arsenal. I mean, it's like, dude, right? And so I know they can't possibly afford all the stuff that they got. And so there comes Dave Ramsey, my boss here, and one of my just a great friend. He in his millionaire study, number 3 on millionaires, jobs in the United States of non-inherited wealth. Number 3 was teacher. And the idea was, they make a plan and they follow the plan, all that. There's some truth to that, but deeper than that, my wife comes from a family of teachers. My wife was a teacher for years before she became a professor. She knew going in, I'm going to drive a Corolla because this is the life I signed up for because I'm a teacher. And so there was an owning reality, if you will, choosing reality, if you will. I'm going to make $42,000 a year. So I'm going to drive a Corolla and this car is going to never fail me. I will never have one person be like, dude, that's a dope car ever. Never will that happen. And if I need to drive in some wild situation, I'm going to use I'm moving over to be a policeman now. I'm going to use the tricked out Tahoes or the Explorers or the old Cruisers that I don't understand how they're still driving, but they still are. Um, and for my regular civilian life, I'm going to go to and fro in a Camry.
Mm.
Why? Because that's what I can afford. And I'm not going to put the additional stress on an already stressful life with my body knowing, dude, if you get fired, they take your house because you owe so much money. They take your car. You don't control your life. MasterCard does. It's funny to me how we watch these shows and the number one killer in America is not gunmen. It's not terrorists. It's heart disease. And if we were really serious about, you know, not dying, we would be unilaterally focused on reducing chronic stress in our lives. And if you sign up to be a policeman, you're signing up for a very stressful life. That means you have to go over and above to create a life outside of here that's peaceful. Don't owe
Right.
anybody any money. Drive the Camry, right? Drive the Camry. Don't get your car jacked up. Don't buy the giant $100,000 truck and then you give your body a chance to go in and do this really important, powerful job that you signed up for.
Mm. Yeah. You clearly know cops. when you talk, when
It's my gang,
you
dude.
talk about the lifted trucks, and it's just like,
Hey, dude, you
man,
could
you
drive
got us
through a
pegged.
precinct and just be like, "I know what y'all all make.
Mhm.
What is happening here? Either y'all have some really rich wives or y'all owe a lot
Yeah.
of money,"
Everyone's
right?
on that overtime drip, right? Like they're
Y
married to the overtime paycheck, which is really
Yeah.
dangerous and creates all sorts of other.
But if you do overtime for 2 years to put your kids through college, if you do overtime for 3 years because you and your wife are gonna pay off all your student loans and put a massive down payment on a house, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Oh, that's great, but that's different than
If you live
I
on
need
overtime
overtime
just
to
to
pay the
prop up your
electricity.
yeah,
Exactly.
to prop up your shiny toys and to pay your water bill, now you got a problem. That's right.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so, um, and you just touched on it too. But the next, the next choice you suggest we make daily is a huge one for me, and something I had to really adapt into my daily life to mitigate that stress. Because I don't live extravagantly, but yet I had a long time where I thought I was handling the stress really, really well until I wasn't.
Mm,
And mindfulness for me was a huge factor in stopping the first step of stop digging the hole, right?
yeah.
If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Right.
And so I was really happy to see that as one of the choices. And you make it clear that you're not talking about like the gray flowing robes and the kind of woo woo sense of it, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people still misunderstand what mindfulness is. But one of the things you suggest, which I really liked, was curiosity, and to demand evidence of the thoughts that you're having in your head, which I think relates back to solving for reality and understanding that what we think may not always be correct, right? And having some self-awareness about that. And I'm curious if you can touch on that a little
I would
bit.
go one step deeper. What
Please.
you feel is often not accurate
Hmm.
because your feelings, um, their job is not to tell you the truth. Their job is to keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you feel like this political party is the enemy and hates America, I feel it. And by the way, there's some research, man. And again, this is me talking to my family. There's some research that suggests that police officers, in particular wings of police officers, believe their intuition more than the average person, and their intuition is at at best not better, and in some cases less accurate than what I would call quote unquote civilian intuition, right? So there's this idea that like, oh, I know, oh, I can tell that guy's guilty. I can tell they're gonna do a thing, and that's actually not wrong. It's actually not correct. But what you have is very important alarm systems, feelings designed to go, hey, I think there's a fire. I think there's a fire, and then your job is to run over and see if there's actually a fire over there. And if you run the fire trucks every time the alarm goes off, eventually they're going to say, "Stop doing that. There's no fire here. At least go look and see if there's a fire. Don't just run them every time." And so similarly with our feelings, if they set off every time somebody cuts you off in traffic and you instantly dump into a story, that guy's just doing this. Man, your body is in a war. You are in fight or flight. And all mindfulness is extending that gap between that guy cuts you off and you go, and you exhale. And then this is the hard part. And I tell this story everywhere I can because I think it's so important. What happens next, I get to choose. The guy cuts me off in traffic, I flip him off. The guy cuts me off in traffic. My dad used to do a hilarious thing. He would just light him up. He had a detective car, so he had just like the one light on it, and he would just light him up. And as a kid, it was awesome, right? Because they would instantly slam on their brakes and be like acting all perfect. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
One day we'll do another podcast, and I'll tell you about the time my dad and I went to Steve Miller's show and somebody passed him a joint. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. But I get to decide whether I allow my body to dump cortisol and adrenaline in it, and it's go time. And I create a story about the guy that just cut me off. That guy's doing drugs. I got to stop him. He's doing this. Or I can exhale and whisper a quiet prayer. Dear God, I hope he gets to the hospital before his wife dies.
Mm.
One of those stories is going to give my body peace. And it may be total bullcrap. But here's what's important. Neither of those stories impact that dude in that car ahead of me because he's driving on listening to his stupid music. He's not paying attention to me. One of the choices is a choice for me to feel powerful in the moment and give myself a stroke, or the other is to open my hands and be a little more peaceful and show up for my family who actually matters.
Mm.
A little bit later with some peace in my heart. Hey, I prayed for a guy that I think he was heading to the hospital, right? I get to pick that story. That's mindfulness. Can you extend that gap? And by the way, it's important to call out that gap can get you killed as a police officer. And what I think is challenging, if you're a UFC fighter, you put a mouthpiece in, you put on headgear, and then you go to work. You literally fight another human. Then you take the mouthpiece off, you take the headgear off, and you can't hit the lady at the cash register, right? When you're off duty. When you're a policeman, you're kind of always on, right? You're kind of always there. And if you're too mindful in an active situation, you get yourself hurt. You got to respond. You got to go. That's what all that training is for. And so you have to do the work to say, I'm not on right now. I don't know if that's a ritual, if that's a process. Dr. Young taught me some processes to just say, I'm not on right now. But that allowed me to be present with my wife. I'm not going to make up stories. I'm not going to make them up about my kids. I'm not going to pretend I have this omniscient power in my neighborhood. I'm just going to be a dude who loves being a good neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. Learning that distinction is really critical.
Yeah.
And we all, I think, well, we don't all get there at some point, but one of the things I recommend for people is, get dressed at the station. Don't wear your gear home. Don't, unless you absolutely have to. But when you come in the house, even just in the white t-shirt and the patrol pants,
Mm.
you're still keyed up and you're still queued up and you're wearing part of that uniform. And if you can leave it all, literally leave it at the station, and then set an intention as you end your shift to think about, who do I want to be now? Do I want to be Garrett the cop, or do I want to be Garrett the husband and engaged father? And
Yeah.
if you can actually verbalize that, like actually sit there and think about it, it'll shift your brain into that mode of, okay, now I'm Garrett the husband, or I'm
Yeah.
Garrett
I
the
heard I
father.
heard of one guy that pulls into his driveway and quickly prays for his wife. God, I don't know what she's gone through today. Or if you're not a person of faith, universe, I don't know what my wife's experienced today. Help me to be totally present when I walk in the store.
That's a
And
big one.
you're calling out, I am now a dad and I'm now a husband. Here we go. Right.
Love it. Yeah. The next choice you suggest every day is to choose health and healing, and that's a big one for me right now.
Just
Is
stepping on some policeman toes. Yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah.
It's great. And so I wanted to read from the book, if you don't mind, just real quick, just because
Oh, love it.
it's almost a throwaway sentence, but I wanted to really dive into it. And you say, I thought if I took apart I thought if I took apart anxiety and knew how it worked in my body, how it activated hormones, neurotransmitters, and neuromodulators, I could finally understand and fix my broken brain. Likewise, when it came to, quote, fixing my mental health, and then parentheses you say, which is a statement I hate with all my heart because it is not medically, spiritually, or mechanistically correct.
Hmm.
I was wondering if you could explore that for me and flush that out. This idea of fixing my mental health, because we want to fix things. We're fixers. We go to the scene and we fix things, but
Yeah.
then we struggle with it ourselves. Why can't we fix our mental health?
Um, I I just think the mechanical analogy doesn't work
Mm,
because I think if you grew up in a home where your dad beat you up and then you get married to a woman who ends up being a lot like your wife, or you get married to a husband who is a lot like your dad, and you end up in a job that's pretty rough, that you got stuck on 412 nights, and that means your other 3 days are just kind of, you're in that dreamy, can't sleep, can't wake up state. You're trying to go to the post office, and then you're back on again. And you find yourself, you wake up 2 years later and you haven't really slept a full night of sleep in a long time, and you have intimacy with your spouse as sporadically as you can, and you eat most of your meals in a drive-through. Like, your body is not the problem. Like, your body, like, overreacting, your body deciding to depress, right? To pull you under and slow you down. Your body trying to amp you up, and they call that anxiety, to spin you up to solve problems. Your body's working pretty dang good considering the gas you put in the car and the fact that you never changed the oil on that thing. And so I don't like people looking at themselves and going, I'm broken, I got to be fixed. Are there brain tumors? Yes. Is there cancer? Yes. Is there true psychiatric illness? No question. All people who work the streets have seen it. What I'm talking about is, for most of us, our bodies are working, giving us a series of inputs. They're working just like we lined them up. And so the question is, what's my body trying to tell me? And what can I do to better optimize this thing so it can give me the results that are best for all of us?
mm,
And that's a different question than, I'm screwed up, I'm broken, I gotta fix something. No, I haven't been I haven't been honoring this thing the way I've taken care of I've taken better care of my gun and my uniform and my shoes than I have my heart. I'm gonna flip that around, right? I'm gonna start taking care of my body. What does that mean? That means, dude, I'm gonna spend another 30 minutes after a 12-hour shift and I'm gonna go lift weights. That means I'm gonna be intentional about making my lunch, even though, man, it's so much easier just to go through a drive-through. I'm gonna not borrow money. I'm gonna do some of these things so that I'm gonna go talk to a counselor if I need to. My wife and I are gonna do regular annual marriage checkups just to make sure we're still plugged in, because if we're not okay at home, I can't be okay on the street. I can't.
Yeah,
And that is a different approach than I gotta fix everything.
absolutely. I love that. I love the distinction. The last choice you suggest every day is to choose belief. And in that chapter, you attack two of the favorite things of every cop out there, which is sarcasm and pessimism.
Ah, my 2 favorite, that's my love languages.
But it's totally how we can allow ourselves to get hooked by those things and those negative beliefs about ourselves and other people and our boundaries and all those things. You call it the illusion of wisdom, and can you quickly
Yeah.
explain that for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story, but I ended up with a brilliant professor. He was a bioethics professor who I spent a year with. We both did our day jobs, but we met once a week for a year, and I did a evening program with him also on top of that. Um, but in the summers, he was a monk. He would go to a monastery, and he was not married. He just unplugged, but he sat with people in the darkest, most evil moments of the world. That he showed up, and he kind of gave me that spirit. But one of the things he told me one time was the wisdom of this age so often presents itself as sarcasm or pessimism, and optimism or joy, or this idea that, you know what, I think things can get better. People call you crazy. And so it starts with a quick, oh, yeah, the old lady, if my wife won't quit, and man, those people. And then when you say those people, you start to create distance between yourself and your neighbor, right?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it becomes, yeah, if Washington, yeah, if chief, yeah, if the precinct doesn't, oh my gosh, the voters don't. And you create this world where you are the perpetual victim of
Hmm.
every negative thing, and everything's covered in a dark cloud. And here's the thing, it feels like powerful predictive thinking. You're protecting your body from a future calamity. And the reality is that's not true. It
Hmm.
doesn't inoculate you from bad things. It just feels like it does. And so my favorite quote was an old psychologist named Amos Tversky. He's a savant. He's so brilliant. And he gave this great quote. He said, pessimism is dumb because if it comes true, if what you worry about comes to pass, you've experienced it twice at your choice. Once when you worried about it, and once when it actually happened. So he's like, why not aim for the most positive outcome? Do everything you can to make that happen. And then if a bad thing comes your way, we're going to grieve it then. And I thought,
Hmm.
what a great way to live, man.
Mm. I love it. I love it. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to shift gears and ask you some different questions outside of the book. I know, well, especially given the shirt you're wearing, but I know just listening to you that you're a huge punk fan,
Yeah.
punk rock fan, and I'm curious because I grew up on punk music. It was the thing that I think finally lit a fire under me at some point in my life, got me into the music industry before I became a cop, and definitely made me a better cop
Mm.
growing up listening to punk music. I'm curious if you've had a similar experience from your as a therapist and counselor, if punk rock has had any influence on that.
Oh, dude. I mean, there's an ethos. If you've ever been to a punk show, there's an ethos of camaraderie that if you look from the outside, it looks like a bunch of people trying to hurt themselves. It is a very unified, some of the most unified communities, and I've grown up in faith communities my whole life. Some of the most, we're all on the same team ever. I think there's a punk rock ethos, and I was funny. I was talking to my wife the other day about some of these old punk rock lyrics I just grew up on. I just metabolized them my whole life. Are very much about an outsider looking at a problem in a different way. And sometimes it's ridiculous and sometimes it's silly. And of course, there's punk rock that's anti police, there's anti everything. But I think it provides you a different way of looking at a problem and at a group of people. And I think that is good policing, is coming into a situation and to bringing a different perspective to it and saying, okay, how can I be of service in this area? And then the final thing is I learned a lot of, um, my favorite punk rock singer of all time is now a very celebrated nurse in Houston, Texas.
Who's that?
His name is Butch. He was a singer of a band called 30 Foot Fall, which was my favorite bands growing up, and it was a huge punk band in Houston. They never made it big like Blink-182 or the Ramones or anything, but what I loved about it was everybody looked like they were out of place, and and then people would leave. And yeah, some people were struggling, some people were doing drugs, people were and some of us went back to grad school. And some of us left those shows and went back to our work as EMS folks. It really kind of lowers the walls of judgment. Like, dude, we're all in here to have a good time. We're all in here on the same team, and we're going to look at these problems with a different perspective, and we're going to chant together, and we're going to get rough each other up a little bit, and we're going to hug, and then we're all going to head back to our other lives. And so, yeah, dude, it was a big part of who I am.
Awesome. Yeah, I find that similarly with my ability to empathize, my ability to question and not just assume that what I'm being told from the top down is the right thing, and to
That's
have
it.
a
That's
healthy
it.
bit of
Question authority.
cynicism, or
Yeah,
not
exactly.
cynicism, but a healthy bit of skepticism, I guess,
That's right.
about what I'm being told. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. John Delony, the book is Building a Non-Anxious Life. It is, like I said at the beginning, super helpful just for me personally. So it's an honor to have you here. Can you share quickly where people can learn more about you?
Yeah. And Garrett, I just want to tell you, thank you for what you're doing for the men and women out there who feel really lonely, sitting in their squad car by themselves, working late nights and early mornings. I'm grateful for you. Um,
Thank
these
you.
these positive voices of hope and change are really critical. Um, and just my message to your audience: civilians love you, and I know that's not what the media tells you, and that's not what. But my neighbors, I talk to them, I know them, and we're super grateful for the work you and your comrades do.
Thank you for
You
that.
can find me. You can check out my show, the Dr. John Delony Show. It's a podcast that drops. It's like old school Dr. Phil or Dr. Laura. It comes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we take live calls from people and we figure out what to do next. And if any of your officers want to be on it, I'd love to have them. And people call in and we figure it out live. I also co-host the Ramsey Show with Dave, talking about finance and mental health. And and you can follow me on Instagram at John Delony.
Excellent. We'll put all those, of course, in the show notes, so you can find them there as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do for cops, for putting a spotlight on some of the things that we're trying to navigate. To have someone like you in a position that you're in, leading and carrying the torch is I think hugely helpful for people that you'll never even meet. So thank you for what you're doing as well, and thanks for being here.
Well, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have you guys out in our communities, man. Thank you so much, Garrett. Appreciate you.
Thank you. A big thank you to our sponsor, Tactiscan, the reusable pocket-sized narcotics screener that is the first of its kind, using near-infrared spectroscopy to safely detect narcotics and provide field officers with a presumptive narcotics test without needlessly exposing them to dangerous substances or wasting evidence. Their incredible cost-saving technology is a game changer for U.S. law enforcement, and you can learn more at Tactiscan.com. All right, until next time, take care of each other, stay safe. Thanks for listening. Make sure that you have subscribed to the show if you haven't already. If this is your first time listening, thanks for being here. You can follow me on social media at The Squad Room, all one word, of course. The website is thesquadroom.net. And if you have a comment, like I said, drop me an email, Garrett at thesquadroom.net. That's Garrett with 2 R's, 2 T's. And until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.